we think any company that has an economist, certainly has one employee too many.
This question concerns two indicators, Warren, that you have discussed in the past about the general level of the stock market. The first one is the percentage of total market cap relative to the U.S. GNP, which you have said is probably the best single measure of where valuations stand at any given moment. This indicator is at about 125%. That is the ratio of total market cap to U.S. GNP. And that's about what it was when Warren talked about this back in 1999, just before shortly before the bubble broke. The second indicator, which you mentioned in a famous 1999 speech that subsequently became an article in Fortune, is corporate profits as percent of GNP. You had said at the time that number ranged between 4% to 6.5% over a long period of time, which I believe was 1951 to 1999. Well, as of Friday, it is about 10.5% according to the St. Louis Federal Reserve site. That is way above the range you had mentioned. Are the current levels of either one or both of these indicators a matter of concern for the general investing public?
Yeah. Well, it might be the second figure, which is the profits as a percentage of GDP, might be a concern for other segments of society, because what it indicates is that American business has done wonderfully well in recent years, and though it says what a terrible disadvantage it has because of U.S. tax rates and a host of other things, the facts are that American business has prospered incredibly. And the first comparison is very much affected by the fact that we live in an interest rate environment which Charlie and I probably would have thought was almost impossible not too many years ago. And obviously, profits are worth a whole lot more if the government bond yield is 1% than they're worth if the government bond yield is 5%. And so it gets back, and Charlie in that movie talked about alternatives and opportunity cost. And for many people, the opportunity cost is owning a lot of bonds, which pay practically nothing, or owning stocks, which are selling at fairly high prices historically, but they weren't selling at those historic prices with interest rates like this. So I would not. I look at those numbers, but I also look at them in the context of the fact that we're living in a world that has incredibly low interest rates, and the question is how long those are going to prevail. Is it going to be something like Japan that goes on decade after decade, or will we be back to what we thought was normal interest rates? If we get back to what are normal interest rates, stocks at these prices will look pretty high. If we continue with these kind of interest rates, stocks will look very cheap. And now I've given you the answer, and you can take your pick. Charlie?
Well, since we failed to predict what happened and what exists now, why would anybody ask us what our prediction is in the future?
Yeah. Incidentally, the one thing I can assure you, Charlie and I, to my knowledge or my memory, I can't recall ever us making an acquisition or turning down one based on macro factors. And we talk about deals when they come along, but whether it was See's Candy or whatever it might have been, the Burlington Northern, we bought at a terrible time, general economic conditions. But we don't talk. It just doesn't come up because we know we don't know what the next 12 months, 24 months, 30, we know we don't know what that's going to look like, but it doesn't really make any difference if we're buying a business to hold for 100 years. What we have to do is figure out what's likely to be the average profitability of the business over time and how strong its competitive moat is and that sort of thing. So people have trouble believing that. They think we talk about it. We think any company that has an economist, certainly has one employee too many. Do you think of anything rude to say that I haven't said?
Well, it would be hard to top that one.
Okay. Better have some fudge, Charlie.
Very exciting. Yeah, what? Very exciting to see my superstars here. I'm Leo, a value investor from China and a loyal fan of you and Charlie. Many Chinese investors feel all kinds of performance pressure, question, and even laughing at value investing. Many also believe that value investing does not apply to China, where the stock market just doubled over the last 6 months. I would like to ask Mr. Buffett, do you think value investment can be widely applied in all markets or just for material markets, just as the ones in the United States? Do you have any suggestions for value investors to hold against pressure and to be much happy? Thank you.
Okay, I'm not sure I got all of it, but Charlie will help me. I certainly think investment principles do not stop at borders. So if I were investing in China or any place else, India, UK, Germany, I would apply exactly the same sort of principles that I learned from the intelligent investor. I would think of stocks as a small piece of a business. I would think of investment fluctuations being there to benefit me rather than to hurt me. And I would try to focus my attention on businesses that where I thought I understood the competitive advantage they had and what they would look like in 5 or 10 years. So I don't think I would change the principles at all. I'm not sure I got all of the question. Maybe Charlie can elaborate on the rest.
Well, the Chinese have a history of being very entrepreneurial and of gambling very heavily when they have the opportunity. And it has created great volatility in the Chinese stock markets. And when things get bouncy and prosperous like our internet craze here in the United States, China looks a lot like Silicon Valley. I think China would do way better to be more value investor minded and less absorbed in waves of speculation. So I think the more China copies the way Berkshire operates, I think the better it'll be for China.
Yeah, there's a certain irony in that we would do the best over decades if we operated in a market where people operated very foolishly. And the more people respond to short-term events and exaggerated things or anything that causes people to get wildly enthusiastic or wildly depressed actually is what allows people to make lots of money in securities. And on the other hand, it's not the greatest thing for a society. And Charlie and I have benefited enormously by the fact that over a 50-year period, there have been a few periods, probably the most extraordinary being 1973 and 74, where you could buy stocks unbelievably cheap, cheaper than happened in 2008 and 2009. And, it doesn't make sense to have that much volatility in the market, but humans behave the way humans behave, and they're going to continue to behave that way in the next 50 years. I mean, if you're a young investor and you can sort of stand back and value stocks as businesses and invest when things are very cheap, no matter what anybody is saying on television or what you're reading, and perhaps, if you wish, sell when people get terribly enthused, it is really not a very tough intellectual game. It's an easy game if you can control your emotions. And as Charlie says, that he thinks, we've talked about a little bit, that the Chinese market may be more, there may be more speculative influences in it even than in the United States, because it's a relatively new development and it may lend itself to greater extremes. And that should produce great opportunities. Charlie?
Yeah, but there are great opportunities for excess and nasty contractions after unnatural booms and so on. I think China is wise to dampen the speculative booms, and I think the Chinese, I don't think the value investing will ever go out of style. Who in the hell doesn't want value when you buy something? How can there be anything else that makes any sense except value investing?
It never gets that popular, though.
People are looking for an easier way,
Yeah.
and that's a mistake. It looks easier, but in fact it's harder. And there's a lot of misery to be obtained by misusing stocks.
Yeah. Nobody buys a farm to make a lot of money next week or next month, or they buy it, an apartment house. They buy it based on what they think the long-term future is, and if they make a reasoned calculation of that and the purchase price looks attractive, they buy it, and then they don't get a quote on it every day or every week or every month or even every year. And that's probably a better way to look at stocks. Carol?
Mr. Buffett, you have expressed your optimism about the future of America many times and have often made the point that the U.S. simply has a superior economic system. But my question, and this is from Christopher Gaccio of New York City, my question concerns the risk of chemical, nuclear, biological, and cybersecurity problems, and the audience should reflect on the initial letters of those words when I tell you that Mr. Buffett has sometimes dubbed that CNBC. Sorry, Becky.
Well, I just do that to tease people, but
Now, wait a minute. One more. How do these threats affect your outlook?
well, they are the great threat to the United States. We have and will have a wonderful economic system. Your children are going to live better than you do, and your grandchildren are going to live better than they do. And that is that. There are fits and starts and ups and downs, but just go outside, or as you fly home, just imagine what your flying over looked like in 1776, and everything since then is profit. I mean, the farms are incredibly more productive. The cities have grown. It's all here, and that's all come from unleashing the energies and brains of the American people in a system that has worked quite well despite all the deficiencies that we talk about all the time. So that hasn't been lost at all. And people get upset because we're having 2% growth. Well, 2% growth with 1% population growth means 20% gain in a generation. And 20% on 54,000 of GDP per capita is another 10,000 of GDP per capita coming in the next generation. This country has a wonderful future, but as the questioner pointed out, that can all be nullified by either madmen or rogue states or religious fanatics or sociopaths or whatever it may be, who wish to have access to weapons of mass destruction and to nuclear, which is I used to think was the primary one. You can now add biological and chemical and cyber, and there will be an increasing number. There already are a huge number of people that would wish harm, and particularly on the United States, although on others as well. And those people aren't going to go away, and they're going to look for more ingenious ways of utilizing the raw materials that they have or might get access to, and better delivery systems. And we need an extremely vigilant security operation in the United States, and we will have threats. I do a little bit about those things in a few ways, but that's something we live with. But we also live in a country that is going to do extraordinarily well, and if we successfully ward off those threats or at least minimize their impact on us, I still maintain that the luckiest person ever born in history on a probabilistic basis is the baby being born in the United States today. Charlie?
Well, of course, we were a favored place, and we've had a favored outcome, and we've been lucky too. I think I probably lived in the most ideal era that any man in human history could have been born into. I think you too. You have too, Warren.
Right.
But I don't think we should get too smug. China has come up a lot faster than any other big nation ever came up. And
But that's good for us.
well, I think I can hardly think of anything more important than future close collaboration between the United States and China. And you're talking about the two most important nations in the world going forward. And I think it is very important that we like and trust one another and have very good relations and work together to avoid bad consequences that come from other people's mistakes and misbehavior. So I think both China and the United States would be crazy not to collaborate and increase trust. I don't think there's anything more important that we can do for our respective safety and for the general benefit of the world.
If you had your choice, would you rather be being born now with all the qualities you've got, or when you were born?
Well, I must say it's very interesting now, but it was all. I think that's too tough a question. I don't like these very theoretical questions. I'd rather think about something where I might gain some advantage or help somebody else to gain an advantage.